And I guess with the recording too, just ran
Yeah,
even if we do 2 hours, just thinking like which parts need to be recorded for Brian to be more strategic. So just wanting to name that because
yeah.
I know sometimes we record, but if we
What are we doing with that
uh,
recording, right?
yeah, I always think about that.
Mhm. Yeah, it's too real. Tanya, what's coming up for you?
I definitely, I was gonna say also solicit give and receive feedback as the norm that I would like to keep in mind. Just because like I mentioned briefly before, is I have a lot of ideas, but I trust that y'all are also experts. Y'all have created this curriculum and run it, and I want to also like have y'all have be open with me if you think like, oh, I've seen it work out this way in this type of setting, so maybe we rethink that. Like, I don't know. To recap, like I have offerings, but I also definitely want y'all to like push or challenge or like give feedback and say, oh, um, let's like table this and like loop in Lucia or whoever else who would be an expert on this. Yeah, just helping me to get my thoughts kind of in an organized kind of, I don't know, way back to y'all that is also productive. Um, yeah,
That's so real, Tanya. I'm like that
yeah.
that's the constant mental juggle, right? Like what is most important and pressing to share right now versus what can we hold for later or adjust as needed once we see different, whether it's environments, right? Because I think that's the other piece that I'm always thinking about is what will something look like for this group versus right our youth coming up. What I think I appreciate about this space is that we do share, right? Like this is feedback. And I think being open to that, I appreciate you naming that piece, being open to that challenge, right? Or even the pause, is going to be really helpful here because we each have different experiences that we can pull from that makes us, valuable in this space. And I think sharing those thoughts will be one helpful to see what we're each thinking. And we also can help each other with the pacing. So we'll work on it together. But I'm so grateful that you're naming that because I feel that constant juggle as well with just how do we pace the change too. I think that's what it
Mhm.
boils down to for me. Which actually connects to what I'll name is the moving at the speed of trust. I I think it connects to what you're naming, Tanya. And the other layer for me is um the constant, what do they say? It's like a juggle. I think it's really a reflection of me. A constant juggle in my mind of like trying to guess what people need and sometimes feeling like I don't have a sense. Like, what am I basing it off of? Is it just the vibes? Is it just like, thoughts? I think part of it is like leaning into trusting myself more, right? Like sometimes ideas, while I may not be able to pinpoint it to a specific source or like data point, whether it's because of past experiences or whatever, we know what works, we know what hasn't worked. So it's okay to also speak on that and name those moments. So yeah, just wanting to think about what does it look like to move at the speed of trust, as we kind of reflect on what we've been doing in the past and the changes that we might want to make, knowing where we are in the fellowship programming and what is coming down. So yeah, it's all about patience, I think, for me, and losing sense of urgency. Goodness. All right. Well, thanks y'all for jumping in, sharing your norms, getting grounded. A couple of decisions that I do think we need to make are what urgent and important changes, right, do we need to make to the triangle curriculum? There's a couple of sessions that Mireya tagged it already in a comment that we've talked about, that might need some either reframing or adjusting because of the audience that we're presenting to this time around. Would love to hear, Tanya, what you're kind of thinking about too, as you've seen both Alamance pieces and statewide pieces. And you've gotten a chance to see how it lands with a mix of the audiences too, since Alamance had a lot of younger folks. The other big piece to think about is the pending milestones that we have coming up connected to curriculum and how are we having clarity around the roles and responsibilities to make sure that we are moving forward to accomplishing these milestones. And Mireya, I'm assuming that you added this one. Thank you for including it, making sure that we also schedule some time tomorrow to have a triangle run of shows so that we all feel good about the event on Saturday.
That
Okay.
one is more for the actual train.
Oh, the actual retreat. I thought you were talking about
Yeah.
tomorrow, which I think we should probably connect because I think everybody will be back. If I'm not mistaken. So it might be a good point. But yeah, thank you for adding that. Let me include the other one though. Perfect. All right, y'all. Well, let's dig in. Perfect timing. I wanted to start off with having a moment for reflection. I imagine that we would do like 10 minutes of individual dumping, and then we would come back and have some conversation about what we've dumped. Let me also add a couple of other things. As it makes sense in your dumping, I want to also encourage you to look at feedback surveys. They have, while a lot of the survey has focused on impact of the programming in the open comment section, there's been some good conversation around just some best practices or things that we should consider in terms of like the delivery, or there was one around like in a registration having language preferences, because in small groups, folks realizing later that someone preferred Spanish, right? Something like that is great. We do need to include that. Just making sure that we're being intentional about capturing some of those like additional suggestions, I think would be helpful. So I'll bring in the type form or the type form report so that y'all can see those. But
And
yeah.
maybe looking over that, ¿cómo se llama? That document, so Tanya knows what it is. I don't think she's seen this before.
Oh, thank you for flagging that. Let me share my screen and just give you a quick little run through as we go through. All right, so Mireya created this document, which essentially includes all of the like phases of fellowship programming, and then a portion where we can go in and reflect. It's similar to what we've used in the past around celebrations, challenges, changes, and consejos. And then we go through each portion of the phase and write down pieces that come up. Historically, this is like we've had this information spread out in different places, so we're trying to consolidate it all into one place, which is why we're creating these moments to dump. And we've also done this at the end of the entire like phase. When we've gotten to onboarding and workshops, now we've started to split it up because things are starting to become more segmented. So really it's just about coming in and making sure that we're updating these pieces, but it really is just anything that's coming up. What we always say at the beginning is if you've already seen it named, right? Like you don't need to add it again. We tend to just look at each other's feedback to see what hasn't already been included. But you'll see here for this one, we'll focus on reflection, and we'll do the Alamance Retreat 2 and statewide retreat. And then we'll go and start into P3, which is the workshops. I'll update these portions, but it'll be workshop, which Mireya, I'm realizing, I don't know if we did a reflection on workshop 1, but I'm guessing that would just be really you and Brian for Alamance workshop 1.
Yeah, we haven't updated P3 phase. I don't think there's much
Okay.
on there.
Yeah, I'm seeing that. Okay, we'll have to update that.
I know I used to do this, but I don't know if like Brian would need to like own the document now. I'm not sure. So I haven't been looking at it.
That's yeah. Brian and I have a planning meeting next week, so we'll talk about this part of it so that we can make sure we're clear on who's going to keep up with it in the transition. Okay. Does that help, Tanya? So essentially just writing your reflections around P2 and P3.
Yeah, it does help. Thank you.
All right. Okay. Let me play some music. I'll put
Quick note,
yeah.
since this is on Sheets, Tanya, we can't be in the same box at the same time. So just like picking a box that no one else is on. And then each bullet point, like you can't have bullet points on there. So we just like make it so it you enter it in a new line.
Okay.
Mark Robinson has said, if you get pregnant.
Oh my God.
Wow.
Those are wild. Okay, those are wild.
Yeah, this is a wild time to be in North Carolina.
Mhm.
I mean, I guess you're used to wild times, wild political times. It's not new to you.
Yeah,
Well,
exactly.
all right, actually, and I'm gonna to Mireya's point, I'm gonna pause. All right, y'all. Well, I'm wondering what maybe stood out from the feedback that you see shared. What are some things that are jumping out at you as you look at what you shared and what other folks have named from the retreat feedback?
As I'm reading, I'm like, oh wait, now I want to talk about this.
I'm like, I see you in the document. Are you pulling something? Maybe?
I'm writing something else. I don't know. Let me see. I think for me, things that I'm still thinking about is like catering. Like for Alamance, I mean, in general, right? Even for Alamance and statewide. With Alamance, just I think a lot of people in our community are just not on time. We're not on time, you know? And so either, I mean, I'll tell y'all, for my wedding, for my graduation, I told my family an hour before the event, and we were always late, but on time, because it was later than I told them, but on time for the actual time. So I just think we need to like be strategic, either just always be more cautious than maybe what we already are, and also having those like honest conversations in situations where we know we'll continue to work with people, or we want to continue to work with people like Lorena, who I think, and her mom, you know, I think that was one of the big highlights. And I wrote it in my comment too, of like, I feel even more appreciative of it and grateful of it. After okay, I was like, I should have savored that thing so good.
Oh my God, that's so real.
I do think that in statewide, it was I I don't know, day one, like time felt so great. And then day two, I think things just happened, and they just happened the way they needed to. But I have been thinking about like how we weren't able to dive into the Yo Soy project, and it felt more of just like we dumped it on them and said, you'll figure it out. You got time. And someone commented in the chat yesterday, like, where are the instructions? We're like a month away, right? And so how can we sure we support them in that, and it doesn't feel random, it feels intentional, it doesn't feel like something that we just want them to do for fun. Yeah, I think one other thing that I've been thinking about statewide is how we mix casas. And we have talked about how some of our younger people were together often, but I think that happened across other identities too, but they were split up in their casas. And with our younger people, they were placed together. But even when we think of the men were sitting together at lunch, like every day, right? But because they were split in their casas, they were mixed up at other times of the retreat. Some of the women, I think some of the like older women, like they were together often, but they were also split up during casas. So I think just thinking about how some identities naturally like gravitate toward each other. And so thinking about the mixing of that, which I think we do, especially with our men, we try to divide them up. So I think similar to that, with our younger people, they naturally gravitated toward each other before they were even in the casa. And then they were in the casa, so they were spending time in casa and outside of casa. So that's what's just on my mind of like, I think we is the first time we've done it where last year it didn't look like that. And we're just learning of like, what are some of those identities that will naturally gravitate to each other? So how can we use the casas to mix people up with people so that they can meet people that are different from them in different ways?
The one question that I want to dig into that I think will impact potentially how we explore next week is this open question of how interested are we in explicitly naming overarching systems of power and oppression, thinking about asset versus deficit based, what is Latinx's perspective? And I'm assuming this was you, Tanya? Yeah, can you tell me a little bit more? What are you thinking? What are you seeing?
Yeah, like looking back at my notes of comparing Alamance and statewide, and this is even present at both. In some sessions, they would name, or facilitators would name, like I'm thinking about Alamance in when Brian was presenting on dominant asset base. I think we talked a little bit about like colonialism and how that has shaped like maybe like cultural practice and stuff like that. I thought personally that was like impactful to name. And then in statewide, I noticed that, like, for example, in the freedom dreaming session, and I'm sorry, my notes are a little incomplete, but like we talked about what freedom dreaming is, but like not as much about like the roots of why we need to freedom dream. And I don't know if Latinx Ed's perspective is to dive deeper into these things, like freedom dreaming as an, its origins in the Black radical tradition and scholarship. Are we talking about racism, anti-Blackness? I don't know if capitalism, things like that. And I don't know, like a lot of these things are probably just like when you're in the moment as a facilitator, right? You're getting out the main ideas and like you don't necessarily want to dive deep into certain concepts. So it's less of like a negative thing, more of like, what is our stance? Do we want to bring that into conversations in Triangle on like ethnic, racial self-ID and this idea of like la cultura cura, like who is telling us that our cultura is, um, practices are like not worthy of being celebrated? Like, are we just naming that and not root causes? I don't know.
I love this question, Tanya. I am like, what a serendipitous moment. I was preparing for the session for Thursday, or just thinking through the civic engagement session. So I was actually going back to Semillas curriculum to see like, how did we explore some of these topics? And in Semillas context was the high school, or the program that started out for high school students, it transitioned to primarily serving college students, high school students. But it was essentially identity racial formation for youth in the South. A lot of what we do in fellowship actually came from the Semillas curriculum, or was informed by Semillas curriculum. But there was a whole session in Semillas around, let me look. One, being able to, there was a whole day where we talked about Nuestra Lucha, and it was focused on historical implications of colonialism in today's society, present-day systemic barriers that impact Latinx immigrant communities, and ways in which implicit bias and microaggressions continue to exist. So it is not new to the content. I do think it has gotten lost as we try to identify like what is the most critical information that we want to share, because Semillas was 3 weeks. We are now at 4 days and it's been tight. I do think though what you're saying is something that we can bring back, especially because I'm thinking about the people who we are serving in the Triangle Retreat, and we can make assumptions. I think anybody can benefit from, having a baseline understanding of power systems and the way that they impact our experience. But there's a little bit of hope that potentially older folks have experienced that in other spaces or have seen that, right? But I do wonder if there's something that we can incorporate in this retreat, and how we might be able to connect it to, like how these systems impact our experience and why it's so important to then move into systems change, to then move into freedom dreaming. So yeah, I appreciate you flagging that. And let me drop those lesson plans, because I think there's some that we can adopt from from there.
Yeah. I think we've definitely been having more discussions about this, Tanya. So
Yeah.
just like you like repeating that and reminding us again of, I mean, we have had more time to plan this year and even had a little bit more scripts in our lesson plans, but we have consistently been very tight on creating our curriculum. And so I think sometimes we miss out on opportunities of like naming what it is. And so, yeah, I think we've just been wanting to do that more. Sometimes, not necessarily with what you're naming, but I think depending on what we're talking about, I also just think about being mindful of how many terms we like
Yeah.
like how many terms are going to be new, and if we, depending on what it is, like colorism, I think it's important to name, right? But depending on what it is, like if we just throw a lot of terms at people, people will become confused because they're focusing on the term and not necessarily on like things that they already know about it. And for example, I don't know if we said colorism at a statewide retreat, but there were a lot of conversations about people naming, their experiences or what they've noticed in small groups and maybe even in larger groups. And I'm not saying that that should be enough, but I guess also how do we continue to center some of those conversations? And it is always challenging because we just need to acknowledge of like, what do we say no to and what do we say yes to? But I am saying yes to what you're naming, that we do need a name, the systematic things that we're working against. I mean, and because we talk about like language is power, like calling things what they are is important too. So those are kind of just like a lot of thoughts at the same time.
So we don't have a stance against it, Tanya.
Okay.
Yeah, that's true. The question is,
There's not.
we just have too much in our head that sometimes we're like, wait, we know what those words are and we never use them.
Okay, that's good to know. Yeah, no, I was just wondering. And I agree with you about like it's difficult to even think about how to incorporate naming these without, I'm not gonna say without knowing like the fellows like standard of knowledge, but like what are they coming in knowing? What are they, yeah. And yeah, not throwing too many things their way. I think about that in like relation to me and Mireya talked about this, I think it was the racial self-identification session too, but the different terms like ethnicity, nationality, all of that. Not that it's too much, but it's like wondering about remixing that so it's not just listing things off a slide. I don't know.
Absolutely. I think that that's what I was thinking about heavily yesterday with the session. Like and I feel Alice deeply, like it's such when it comes to advising undocumented students, right? It's like very specific information, and it is I think this is the piece that sometimes weighs heavy. It's like if you share something incorrectly, or if someone shares something incorrectly, it could quite literally impact someone's livelihood, right? Or their experience and education. So there's a lot of pressure to feel like, or to have this information accurately shared. And I think because of who we are, okay, we love perfectionism and we struggle with it and we want to be the best, right? And have all of this information out in the best way possible. But I do sometimes wonder how we can incorporate more of the fellow's voice, and how we can create more moments of co-learning. And I see that happening through conversation and discussion, but it's sometimes hard when it's stuff that's so like, it feels like it has to be correct or has to be shared in a certain way. So that's the struggle that I think we need to unpack a little further and explore, because there's definitely a way to do it differently, I think. Any other thoughts that are coming up, whether it's about the retreat itself or content with retreats? I think everything else. You'll have things.
Are we
Yeah.
talking about workshops?
Yeah, let's go ahead and move in. If there's nothing else with the retreats, we can move into workshops. Yeah, because I think we've addressed the big pictures. Go
Be
ahead.
jumping around, but what was
Yeah.
coming up that I'm thinking a lot about is like how collaborative our
Mm,
relationship was with Alice, and obviously she's part of our team.
right.
And so, you know, originally she didn't have a lot of moments for conversation or just like,
Mhm.
and I think, you know, I've helped facilitate oftentimes those workshops are, especially because it's usually an hour. I think the longer Undocumented Carolina training has more engagement,
Yeah.
but in the 1 hour trainings, it is very like info heavy. And but because our relationship was very collaborative and she was very open to kind of what came up for me, and I shared like maybe we shouldn't do a case study and we should just provide more opportunities for them to chat or engage with you in the chat or have a breakout room. And that allowed for some of that to happen throughout the workshop. Um, but I feel like traditionally, like presentations are like, here's the info, and I'm gonna tell you the info. And sometimes, and then last year we had some really great experiences with some speakers, and then we had some that weren't the best. So as I think about our upcoming workshop with Dr. Dollar, I haven't seen him present. So it's not that I'm feeling nervous because I know Kira, you said that you've seen him present and he's really great.
Mhm.
But I just I know something that fellows share, especially during the retreat, about the virtual engagement is they want to talk, they want breaks, they want it to feel engaging. And so I think when we can have those collaborative relationships with our speakers,
Mhm.
we can have results where I feel like yesterday we were able to shape some of what it looked like to share some of the info, even if it was still info heavy, like there were moments of engagement that allowed fellows to not just sit and listen to someone speak for an hour, you know?
Agreed. What was coming up for me, Mireya, as you were saying that is also the, like, how are we, when we make the asks of speakers, and I think you have done a good job of this with like making sure that you connect at the beginning, right? We talk about what the expectations are with the workshop, but when we make the asks of speakers, how are we ensuring that we're naming the importance of having them engage with the participants? I also wonder if there's maybe a moment where we create our own like culture of what it means to present, because I think presentation has its own connotation, right? Like if I'm presenting, I'm assuming that you're expecting me as a content expert, right, to just share information. We do it differently though. That's not how we've been used to presenting information. So maybe we call it something else, right? Like I don't know, a discussion, conversation, something different that allows folks to really think outside of the box of what they've been used to doing with presentations. But yeah, I think there's an opportunity here to create our own practices, because you're right. It's been nice to have more of that conversation style participation.
Yeah. And I will say that when I met with Dr. Dollar, he was like, he didn't say this, but he looked confused and he said, wait, like you are asking me to present, but then I also hear you say facilitate. And I just want to know like what you mean.
Mhm.
And I was like, oh, I feel like I'm using it interchangeably. But for me, you know, the way that we present information is very engaging. We facilitate conversations throughout. We engage with participants. And so I might just use it interchangeably. And I didn't know I was doing that. He's like, oh, okay, okay. He's like, because for me, facilitate is like facilitating a panel. And I
Oh,
was like, for me, that's moderating a panel, you know?
mhm,
So even the words that we use,
mhm.
like people have different understandings of what they are, which I'm glad he asked and he wasn't thinking he was going to moderate a panel.
That would have been, well, imagine showing up, baby, you are the panel.
You are the panel.
You can What's coming up for you, Tanya?
I'm so glad that you guys are naming that, and Kiara, that are talking about like how do we think about like what do we call this to invited speakers or guests or whatever, because I think that's something that distinguishes Latinx ed, or what I would hope that we work towards when we like think about like sessions is like, yeah, we don't want to just have speakers come in and present information at people. Like all the times that I've been most interested in learning have been like Socratic seminars and discussion-based things where I feel like I'm able to chime in, add my own kind of input. And like we were naming last night at our like debrief after, like um, maybe Alice named this, that we're like co-learning with fellows. So, the value of Latinx Ed is that we're bringing in experts or people that are, specialized in certain topics, but also inviting fellows to kind of step up as experts, because like Alice was naming, like a lot of folks know more than her, or like are more, connected to this community and can speak on things. So yeah, no, I'm just glad that you guys are naming that, because I think that's something that would distinguish Latinx Ed's programming from other just like random webinars you can just sign up for that are just like you on a Zoom, no chat box, just sitting there. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, that feels like the grounding like approach, right? For all of the way that we teach, how we teach, it really is about creating these moments of co-learning. So I'm glad that that is resonating, Tanya, and that you see how it's impacting our programming or shaping our programming. All right. I'm wondering, we have technically like 3 minutes left in this session, but it feels like we've gotten a chance to go through, reflect on some of the big pieces. I do want to carve out some time to talk about the 2 sessions that we've been already naming. And let me actually share the Triangle Retreat agenda, because I'm wondering if we just go through and share any questions, curiosities, comments about the way that the programming is structured currently, so that in the next week, especially as Lucia returns tomorrow, Mireya, y'all have what you need to kind of hit the ground or continue hitting the ground running with mapping out the actual content. Does that feel good? This over here to y'all. So all right. Not both of y'all already in the document. Okay, so it was just me. I'm pulling it up for myself. All right. Let's dig in then and start with, I'm wondering, Mireya, since you essentially updated this, do you mind walking us through the flow that you were imagining? And then we can focus on the 2 sessions, CCW and Nuestro Poder.
Tanya and I did walk through this with your first schedule, so I feel like she's pretty
Okay.
familiar, and we had discussed some of the changes I had
Oh, perfect.
suggested, and so I guess like the biggest update is that we did make some of those changes, specifically moving Casa building to day 1. And so yeah, you can see that that's one of the biggest changes from before. I'll still walk through each day, I think, so I can also name what I feel like our needs for curriculum. And so with El Círculo time, I think I had just named wanting that potentially we would need more time for that. And what you're saying, Kiera, here is that maybe our break. Oh, okay. Did you already make that change then?
Yeah, now it's a 45-minute session. So it's a little bit longer. And I do imagine very brief welcome, right? Like, hello,
Yeah.
glad you're here. Yeah.
Yeah.
So hopefully that gives us more time.
Yes. I think there's like a vision here for this, which I'm really excited about. I'm wondering like if we take that curriculum people now, or like what that will look like, because I know Brian, I think, is connecting it to Mingle Mingle. And I think I know what the vision is for that, but just wanting to get clarity on like roles
Yeah.
for us versus maybe you and Brian, who are facilitating and kind of shared this vision
Yeah.
for the session.
Yeah, the vision is really how do we make the fellowship pathway data that we share out more interactive. We started to do that a little bit with statewide when we asked folks to like raise their hands and shout out when something was called out. It's a combination of doing that or pieces of that with the Nuestro Mapa activity. So even asking folks to like move to different sections depending on their countries of origin or like group together based off of their countries of origin, for really incorporating more community building components so that they are getting to know each other throughout the activity and also getting to know the information that we would have essentially shared with them via the presentation. So I'm imagining a combination. In the past, we've done an activity called Mingle Mingle where you shout out something and it's you group up by number. So it might be like group up by a number of 4 and then you mingle and talk about a specific question within that group. So that incorporating some of those pieces into this session, I think can allow us to build community and also share the information in a new way. Does that help me?
So would you say like we could say like group by, instead of saying like group by 3s or something, it's like group by college versus high school.
Yes.
And then like they have to find each other.
Yeah.
Or like group by, I don't know,
Group by the county.
North America, South America, Central America.
Country, yeah, or your cultural roots, yeah. We can even
Cool.
add some fun ones, right? But I think staying grounded in who are we and then going into that would be helpful.
Cool. I think that's a really nice way to do it with youth, especially because we're not having a human map, but in some ways that human map is what is still happening here, where we want people to connect to their journeys and things that they're similar or different from others. Cool. I know you've mentioned like wanting to think about how the fellowship. Well, first, I had mentioned briefly that if you were thinking of doing Nuestro Propósito at this Saturday's event, then because I'm assuming we would be talking about what is the fellowship, then wondering if we would still need it at the actual
Yeah.
At the actual retreat. I'm assuming that all fellows will be there, but this is like the very first time we're gonna meet them. We're gonna find out how attendance really is, but I mean, at the end of the day, like they also know that it's required. So if they miss it, it's kind of on them. And I think you just removed it. So
From where?
is it? Oh no, never mind. It's there. It just moved. So I don't know what you might be thinking about that.
Yeah, let's talk that through because I have a couple of thoughts. One is so it connects to this Saturday let me back up a little bit. I think that session for the purpose of youth, and I was thinking about this even with statewide, I wonder how we can make the story of the fellowship come alive with more interaction. And we did that with Alamance. I think we had more time with Alamance and we had more questions incorporated. We just felt the rush at statewide, but I'm seeing an opportunity to pivot, like with the, instead of having people shout out, right? Like what has love meant for them? Can we have people still do some sharing out and having sticky notes? So just really making those pieces more connected to their individual story so that they also see themselves reflected in the story of the fellowship rather than just me and Brian kind of talking about what those values mean to us. Mireya, to what she just named, right, shared this idea of if we're going to do this at the brunch, can we cut the time? I'm not opposed to that. I think there could be something really powerful of even just having a like shared moment of learning or exploration, not just with the students, but also with the caregivers. I think that could be a really powerful experience for them to share with just like understanding what their children will be kind of going through. Here's the biggest question, and is because of my struggle with time. I'm looking at the agenda that Brian has proposed, and he is proposing that we move to the auditorium to the theater for the welcome and introduction, but we really only have 20 minutes for that section within some transition time, or 30 minutes. So that's what I'm struggling with, the timing, because 30 minutes feels ambitious to do a whole like team introduction and then also let's tell the story of the fellowship. So curious if y'all have any thoughts or reactions, but that's where I'm at right now with the vision, the current challenge.
Yeah. I think, yeah, because even in my head, I'm like, you also want to have, I don't know if in the agenda we have like 30 minutes for people to just like get their food. And I don't know how much food we're giving, but as people arrive and figure out how to get there, because
Right.
people are gonna be late. And so just thinking about that. I think we said we would do a tour, and I don't know if we are gonna do that. I would just say if we could be as close to the main rooms we're gonna be at, the better, because that's less walking, that's less moving around. And then you technically don't need a tour, right? You are where you should be coming to the day of. You can walk around and look at how pretty Carey Academy is, but you don't really need to know all those other spaces. So just wanting to think about that.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess maybe when we talk about that part, then we can make a decision. But it does really excite me to engage with the caregivers, and
Yeah.
regardless, we have the time for day one to do it too.
Mm-hmm.
So everything else is pretty much the same: ceremony, sorting ceremony, casa forming, casa presentations, and community norms. The next day we're doing leadership journeys, circle of truth, which we did as statewide. We did it with elements, but we did it raising our hands. I don't even know why. But I think stepping into the circle is better. I really liked it with statewide, so just thinking about that. De aquí y de allá. This is the session where you have mentioned like the list, and I had been trying to work on making it less list heavy. I am not sure why we still go over those slides. I don't think I had envisioned keeping the slides with the list, because what's on the list of all the identity labels is what's on the timeline. So I don't feel like we should be doing both. So I think that's one of the biggest change I see making for this, and just ensuring that I think we define things in the timeline as well. So if we don't have the definition, just making sure that the definition is actually on there. And then with La Cultura Cura, one of the feedbacks from my part was that the who am I, that the session is 75 minutes. And I think that's what we have planned just for the material piece. So the who am I is separate from that time. So if it's 75 minutes, I don't know if we'd have time for who am I, but I felt like it was, I think I've been thinking about what experiences are part of the professionals retreat versus the youth. Because last year we tried to do everything the same, like exactly the same. And we've learned that, it shouldn't be that way. And so I had felt like maybe the who am I activity, like there's something else we can do, or maybe we just cut it because of the time. But I have been wanting to look at the Semillas curriculum, which I have opened the 2022 one to see, because I learned that this is actually something y'all did in Semillas. So just wanting to think about what that actually looked like. But yeah, I think for me, time is the biggest thing. Even if we did keep who am I the way that it is, right? Like I'm just thinking of time, and we actually did do it differently for statewide. So if we did keep it somewhat the same, maybe the 75 minute will still work, but yeah, so we'll see what that will look like. And part of my last conversation with Kiera was looking through the semillas to kind of see how it was framed. Any thoughts here?
Wondering for if we're cutting the slides, I think that's a good move, Mireya, to cut the terms slides again, because I noticed that last time that it was the same slide or same information that was already in the timeline. I think it made sense to share it at statewide because we didn't have as much time on the slides or on the timeline due to the transition pieces. But I'm wondering if cutting those slides gives any more time back, if there is any value in talking about some of those systems of oppression and how it has led to some of the ways in, which either terms have been created, or I'm wondering if there's a connection there that we can potentially weave in. I just shared with both of you the lesson plans connected to systemic racism and systems of oppression from Semillas. I think there might be some pieces that we can potentially incorporate. So just some food for thought as you're remixing that session, that I think there might be some connection there to some of.
One thing that Tanya and I talked about when we were going through this too, she shared kind of thinking of like, what do we mean by la cultura cura? And I had put a slide that like acknowledged where it came from. And there was like the definition that was on the website, but I don't know. I guess I've also been thinking of like, how do we also make it our own? Because I feel like depending on the kind of work you do, there's different framing for things. So maybe not using that definition, but how the work that they've done is inspiring kind of how we're doing this session, and then actually naming what it means for us. So that's the other piece about La Cultura Cura that I think we'll be working on, ensuring that we're like, people understand what we mean when we say it. And I think we kind of did that. I love when Tere was like, La Cultura evoluciona too. Like that was so cool. So it's kind of cool to see like throughout, as we continue to do this session, like what phrases will come out of it,
Yeah, agreed. I love that. I'm excited to see that remix.
With Nuestro Poder, we had talked about it becoming more civic engaged related, and Kira also just named that she's been looking at that, thinking about what that will look like. It sounds like she has maybe like a outline of what it could be.
Yeah, I have a lesson plan. Let me share it with you. I'll link it in the document.
Oh, okay. And I had originally thought about how we could maybe invite people and or specifically highlight youth who are kind of engaging in this way. Do you want to chat through that?
Yeah, I would love to hear y'all's reaction. Because I'm like, it's either I took a turn and it's wild, or we're in alignment and it's great. So I had this, I've been thinking a lot. Again, I was like, let me get re-inspired by looking at Semillas. And one of the things that we used to do that inspired the terminology timeline that Mireya has added into the curriculum is that we talked about Latinx education history and like pivotal moments that have shaped the experience of Latinx individuals in education. So then I started thinking more, and I was like, how are we connecting civic engagement, right? What is the purpose of civic engagement? And originally I was really thinking about voting. That was where my mind was. But then as I was searching, I was like, what are some other ways that civic engagement has led to, or what is the connection from civic engagement to systems change? Because I think that's still the big picture that I want to make sure folks leave with, regardless of their age, right? Like you have choice and power in driving systems change, and that might look different depending on your age, but everyone has that choice and power. So then as I was Googling, there was this one article that came up that was like student movements and civic engagement. And I was like, this is it. Okay, so here is the idea. I am proposing that we do a combination of systems change civic engagement, and student-led movements with the objective of exploring how student-led movements impact civic engagement and systems level change. What I hope that folks see through this session is how valuable and critical youth voice is to driving systems level change. When we think about a lot of the change that has happened, it has been driven by youth, right? Like regardless of whether or not they're able to vote, there have been a lot of student-led and youth-led movements. So the way that I see this flowing is that we start with still an introduction to systems change. I think the example of the fish in the lake is easy enough for anyone to grapple with. And we've seen that regardless of your age, you're going to struggle a little bit, you're going to grapple. But what I like is that it's a simple example and it's such a simple way to start to understand, right, how bigger pieces impact the way that we navigate the lake. So I would still propose that we keep that. Then we can move into civic engagement and systems change. So like, what is civic engagement? What role do they, the fellows currently play in civic engagement? Curious to get a sense of like, who's voting, who has voted before, who's voting for the first time, who feels too young. And then I found this definition that felt really grounding for me around when I'm thinking about civic engagement, what are we actually talking about? And this definition felt grounding because it's challenging us to think about more than just political action, right? So it's the process of working to improve a community's quality of life by addressing public issues through political and non-political actions. So I want them to stay grounded in that because regardless of their age, they can still take action and participate in civic engagement. So we move into all of those pieces, and then I pulled 4 examples or 4 movements that we can dig into. We already have content for the LA walkouts because this was one that we've done in the past, and I found some links for some of the other pieces that we can build out. But essentially getting them to walk around the room, engage with these 4 movements and having them consider these questions. How did the movement start? What strategies did they use to gain support? What systems level change did they achieve? And then how can other movements be started in their own community? So getting them to reflect on their own experiences. Moving into some group discussion and then doing some closing reflection around what can we learn and then how can we apply these movements to your own advocacy efforts. That's where I'm at right now. Draft 1. How does that flow feel? Thoughts, feedback? I'm off camera, but I can hear y'all. I just got to put much there. Come on.
I really like where you went with this. 30 and it's 75 minutes, right? Is this session? Okay.
Yeah, let me check here in the calendar though, or in this session. Because I actually think it's just an hour of content.
Oh wait.
Oh yeah,
what you put?
What I propose is only an hour, so we can add or change. Right. 10, 25, 5. Yeah, 60.
Yeah, okay. I like that I think adding more time to some of this would be nice. So it's good that there's 15 more minutes. Because even for like, so for the movements you're highlighting, I love that we're centering like youth, I guess youth resistance, and like how they took action. Are you envision these being like they walk around and read about them? Kind of what like we've done before with some of the, okay, cool. Yeah, I think that's really exciting. I think this is where we would need some more time because if they walk around and we also want to chat about some of these. Oh wait, these are the same things down here.
Yeah, the instructions there are just like consider these questions and then we'll have some conversation. I actually wanted to do this in casas, so I think having more time gives us an opportunity to like discuss in casas and then come back together and have a large group conversation.
True. Something else to consider, which maybe we don't do it, but you did the REI training, Kiara. And I also thought that it was neat that they gave us like, in that case, they gave us a company to research,
Mm.
to share about it. That's what this is giving me vibes of.
Wait, having them research the movements? That is
We,
brilliant.
like we give them, we still decide which movements, but then they go out and research. Kids love, I mean, kids are very tech savvy. They're up in the internet all the time. So when you showed this, that's what I thought about. But then that's why I was asking, like, do you envision this being like a data walk? But if we want to try, like, we haven't done that before, but when I did that in the REI training, I thought it felt really hands-on, you know? And I think it also reminds people that like you can learn on your own too, right? Like we just go on the internet and like look up and then it'll lead you to finding more info. So that that's my proposal. But outside of that, I really like the connections between the systems change to civic engagement.
Any thoughts, Tanya?
No, yeah, I really like the lesson plan, and I would echo the same things that Mireya are saying, that more time for that big systems change through like movements chunk would be necessary, because I think students, or they're going to get really excited about like learning about these things, or getting into groups and doing that themselves. And I like that proposed change of like having the fellows research themselves and maybe like come back and share out you know questions in the group discussion, the ones that we have there. Yeah, no, this is all super exciting. And it's crazy that you brought this in, because in my notes of like, oh, I'll bring this up during curriculum planning, I was like, oh, we're kind of like not talking about things like ethnic studies programs, or the roots, like, the roots in the 60s are basically why I would say things like Latinx ed are doing things the way they do, like, that affirmation of identity. So this is all speaking to me. You have no idea. Like my advisor, I think, was part of the San Francisco
No
protests.
way.
My research is on this. Like this is they're gonna love it.
Tanya, I'm like, are you trying to co-create? Co-lead or actually lead or facilitate this? Yeah, I think your expertise will be really helpful in this space. So that's a true offering. I think you would be a great facilitator for the section, or co-facilitator if you want to co-create. But
Just adding her to that.
let me just
I
make it.
want, oh well, maybe it's me and Tanya. Because
Ooh.
Lucia, I was gonna propose to Lucia. I feel like Lucia would love this. But she is facilitating the next one. Um, so it could be me. Or Kiara, I don't know if we want to, also step in here, but just Tanya definitely needs to be on there.
Absolutely. Yeah. Y'all know I'm happy to be in the background. I do not need to be the one facilitating. I actually would love to see you two in action.
Same.
Mireya, not this. Oh my God, I'm so excited. Well, I'll clean up the skeleton and share it with y'all. I already added it to Asana for you, Mireya, so I'll do the same thing for you, Tom, so that y'all can continue to build on it. But I'm excited to see this come to life.
Yay. After that is freedom dreaming. I think definitely I have a check-in with Lucia tomorrow, Tanya, since she's coming back from vacation. And so I can definitely loop her in on what's gonna happen, like what the agenda is looking like for Triangle. But even she has been one of the people who have also like continuously like called us in, on naming some of this terminology more. And so I think she'll be excited. But you're so right about that piece for freedom dreaming, that it is important to name why we need a freedom dream. I think in the past we have actually named it and then we remixed it, which allowed us to really highlight where it came from. But I think in the remixing, we then like the piece where we would talk about how we kind of live and experience these systems, and it kind of creates it hard for us to envision something different. But naming what those systems are important. So if anything, I think that just like will continue to help freedom dreaming feel like, give it more purpose. And I think last year we had a hard time. I think fellows were really confused about, it felt like it was just thinking about a utopia that doesn't exist, right? And I think we're doing a better job of helping them see how the freedom dream connects to their Yosef poem, right? Too. And like, this is the vision you're working towards. But if you don't have that vision, you don't know what you're working towards. You're not thinking about exactly like, what is it that you actually want to see? So thanks for that. I'll definitely chat with Lucia about it. We'll have some working time after that. Kira, did you say you met with Coastal Carolina?
Yeah, I have some updates on that end. So Coastal Credit Union, Tanya, some context, they are sponsoring the summit, and they are an institute. So they sponsored last year. Their community impact team is actually interested in deepening partnership with organizations that they sponsor. Like, they actually don't like to use sponsorship language, because they really are interested in, just having more deepened partnership, which is exciting. I was a little bit hesitant. I was sharing this with Mireya yesterday, just, like wanting to be really intentional with how, when we bring in guests, right, like, is it aligned with the programming? How is it connected to the conversations that we'll be having? Not just some random, right, like presentation, because we have this other need that we need to meet. So yesterday we had a really great conversation with the team that's going to be on the ground facilitating the session. One ask that I made of them was that they wanted to know what type of information we wanted shared and how we wanted it shared. Mireya flagged yesterday, right, like making sure that we have really interactive conversation, discussion-based sessions has always been a plus. They're down for that. They said that that's what their MO tends to be. So I'm excited to see that in action. The other big curiosity was just their like familiarity with youth, or the audience that we're serving. They said that this is an audience that they are targeting and have been doing a lot of presentations with. So I'm also excited to have heard that, because that gives me a little bit more hope that it'll be a really powerful session. And then the last ask was, can we make sure that it connects to this theme around our power and the power that we hold? So we're talking right about the power in our voice in the morning, where they're really going to be thinking about that power when they're working on their Yosef poems. So really thinking about financial wellness and financial readiness as a part of that, like, power and choice that they have to be better leaders, or to be the leaders that they want to be. So that will be the basis of the conversation, but it will focus on financial education. One other piece for y'all to think about, Mireya, especially as y'all are mapping out the rest of the content, is that they are saying the organizer shared that they are having a DEI meeting that day, and they offered to participate or host any conversations that we wanted them to. If y'all see an opportunity for that, let me know. I did share with them that the schedule was feeling tight, so I wasn't sure if that would be something that we could potentially offer, but they're interested in engaging with our students further. Sharing that as an aside if there's an opportunity, but know that that is not a pressing need or ask, but they will be there for that 1 hour time slot.
Wait, they're hosting something else that day, and then they're saying if we want to participate in that.
The other way around, their DEI team is connecting, and they're asking, is there an opportunity for their DEI team to participate in any conversations that we're having that day? Like, they can facilitate a panel, they can have a conversation, a discussion around things. Yeah. So that was a curiosity.
I do wonder, I was gonna say, like, should they join for the whole day if they want?
Yeah.
I think that could help make their presentation stronger too. Just kind of seeing, one, the vibes, and two, like, then being able to make connections to what they're talking about, because only they know what they're gonna say, right? We don't know that. We can't help make some of those connections yet. We can
Yeah.
only think about the things that
Mhm.
might come up, but we're not sure. So
Yeah.
if they want to hang out, maybe the session, we could prioritize the session, but even I think if they went to civic engagement, that would be great. If they went to freedom dreaming, that would be great too. I think both of them kind of get to the same thing that we hope their session will also lead to, which is thinking about, like you said, the parent choice.
Yeah. Perfect. Yeah, thank you for that thought, Mireya, because I do think that's a great idea to have them, if they're available, right, to come out. I'm also, is it why, well, this is always sometimes I'm a little too overprotective because I'm like, it'd be great to have some extra capacity with the work time if folks wanted to have a thought partner. But then the other side of ¿cómo se dice? Fear and doubt side of my brain is saying, you don't know these folks. They could not, I don't know how they'll interact with our youth, and that always gives me a little bit of pause. But they are on the DEI team. Renee, who is our board member, is on their team too. So we are familiar with some of their people, which is what gives me a little bit more hope. But
I do think, I mean, even based on our last session, this work time is usually more individual. So even if we did invite them, like just thinking about
if they
what
are
they're actually gonna be, I wouldn't want to take away from the work time because we want them to chat with the guests in some ways,
So just keeping it flowing is probably the best move.
Yeah.
Yeah, that feels good. Cool. Well, I'll share those opportunities with them, and we'll keep y'all updated if they choose to decide, or if they decide to join any of the sessions that day, outside of the one that they're leading.
Yeah. Cool. The next day, we're gonna be talking about the fall commitment, which I think will be very similar to the virtual commitment that we've kind of carried out because the fall commitment will also be virtual. I honestly I don't think I've named this in that reflection, but I have really liked having that session in person. And I think that's also why our attendance was so great yesterday and cameras were on. And, like, I can't believe we did that the very first workshop last year. And we had 2 workshops happening at the same time right after that. And I think we ended up with a reflection like those people had no break. We didn't have a break. We were back to back. But I think it has been a game changer they have started really well. And I think it has to do with those conversations. Then we'll do the altars. For a second, I was like, why don't we just do it all together? But is that too wild?
I had the same thought.
Okay. I was like,
oh, but y'all know I love me a good. I'm not good at estimating time. How long did? Yeah.
the other proposal, because it's 6 people per casa. That little altar is gonna be sad.
Really?
Okay. It's gonna be sad. It's not gonna have a lot of things on there. It's
Yeah.
gonna be a little sad. So the other proposal is, what if we split in half?
I'm like that feels sad. It's technically an hour 15 because lunch the transition time is from 12 to 12:15, and it does not take 15 minutes to go walk to the cafeteria from where we'll be. We're actually gonna be closer this year. We don't have to walk across the quad. So I don't know. 24 people, how long on average?
Because
You just never know.
for Alamance, we were less than 20, right?
Yeah, it
It
was
14 plus
6.
5 staff or 6 staff. So we were exactly 20.
Yeah.
I think we did an hour.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I think somebody said it was an hour. I didn't look at the time we started or the time we ended.
It
But
definitely was the 30 minutes we allotted. I know that much. So yeah.
So maybe, yeah, if we want to do a whole group, that was my thought when I first looked at the agenda last week. I was like, Well, we were like 20 people at Alamance and we did it together and it was really nice to do it together. So why
Right.
not do it that way this time too?
Yeah. Let's do it. I'm with it.
All right, let's do it then. There's definitely not gonna be no practice time then. Um, and then presentations. We should be good on time this time. Based on statewide, they were taking like 5 minutes per person. Which is exactly 2 hours, and that's what we have, right? 2 hours. So we should be good.
Yeah.
And then the closing, we will be doing affirmation circle, Kara.
So yeah, that felt
So,
like a for you.
Anya, did we talk about what affirmation circle was? I don't know if this was on there last time. Okay.
No, I'm not familiar.
I really liked it because this was something new we did last year. I think Brian was the one that brought this, right? We haven't done it even in Semillas. Okay, cool. So, I really enjoyed it when I did it with Carrie. It had already been done before, but it's basically we've done 2 minutes. Everybody gets 2 minutes. That person doesn't say anything and everybody tells them nice stuff. Whatever you want to say, like maybe it was something they mean to you, maybe a moment that you really like will keep forever in your heart with that person, like whatever you want. Every person gets 2 minutes and people are so nice. It's just so sweet.
Wow. It's really powerful with youth because I don't know if they've been in that position often or ever. And yeah, it's a really powerful moment too, to also hear just how other people have the impact that you have on other people. Has always been
Yeah. We
fulfilling.
did try it with adults last year and it just didn't hit the same. I think sometimes adults like ya
Yeah.
no son niños, and they just couldn't get into the cute, quirky, nice things.
You will hear the most random stuff. Like, I love
Yeah.
your style. I
Yeah,
love
yeah.
her. Yeah.
Yeah, it's such a like cute experience.
Yeah.
I
Um,
love that. So y'all have done that before?
last year we did it for the first time.
Mhm.
I think I really love it for those who are shy because people really come through with them. And I think, at least from my observations last year, like some of the quiet people, like oftentimes, like they just feel insecure or feel like other people have so much and they don't. And then when we do it, the quiet people, like people are like, your voice is important. Like they'll just hype them up. And I think they walk away realizing that maybe some of the things that they doubted, like they shouldn't because people see really great things in them.
That.
Um, Last thing that came to mind is for statewide, we did try some different grounding stuff based on the book that I had been reading and things like that. Just thinking about one, how did that feel? And two, do you have suggestions based on how that went? And then does any of that feel like it should be framed or done differently with youth?
I really liked the grounding, the full group grounding the first day. I think one piece of feedback that did come to my mind is just like when after the grounding moments, how do we create time for like it's a very powerful grounding. Like we're talking about, impact of colonialism. And I think sometimes when we're in those moments, and then have to pivot to, I think it was like the fellowship story, all of a sudden it felt a little abrupt. So I do just think about the transition, right? It's literally almost like, how do we release and just honor the heaviness of a grounding that is, could potentially bring up some heavy memories. And I think you did that, but we also were so rushed on time. You like named that as you were closing, right? But can we be more intentional about creating more pause and transition for that? But I loved the grounding. I think it was really powerful.
Yeah, I would echo that and say that the grounding was really like I loved I'm thinking about like maybe it was the bonfire or the altar when Kiara Sorry if I'm not trying to mix y'all up, but y'all both have such like calming, like measured voices when you do your little grounding sessions and the breathing. I personally like love that. And yeah, I like what you're naming, Kiara, about like how do we transition in a way that doesn't feel like it's awkward or like very abrupt.
Yeah.
I don't even know if I
Yeah.
have ideas for that, but I appreciate that you named that.
Yeah. Something that come up as you were sharing that, Kira. Maybe it's even like a moment for them to share, is there something, because
Mm.
we're spiritual, right? Like, is there something in your heart that like you want to share with the group? And like, not everybody's gonna share, but it allows people to acknowledge some of the things that they're feeling, right? And knowing that, you know, that others are feeling that way or whatever it is, I think just that moment for people to voice it, I think will allow for it to not feel just like, okay, well now let's move on from that.
I think you're exactly right, Mireya. Is even just that as simple as that, right? Like creating time and space for folks to share any reflections back. So yeah, I love that. That's a great idea.
It could be done like depending on the structure of the room, it could be done a small group or how we've done with statewide when we were in big groups of like just like kind of naming it, raising your hand.
Mhm.
So once I think we'll already be like in el círculo, maybe. So maybe we get in el círculo, we do the breathing, we allow people to kind of share out loud as a group, 2, 3 people, whatever comes up, and then we do carga y regalo. Yeah?
That feels good. Let me make sure
All
I
right.
move into el círculo, grounding, and then carga y regalo.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I like the el círculo
Or it
being
could be the other way around.
Huh?
Sometimes I wonder if having people talk first and warm up
That's true.
before going into just like going straight into the heavy things could be helpful. So maybe
Sure.
just starting off a little friendly, let's just check in. Low stakes, just how are you?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I'm like, not the first activity being tell us how you feel right now. Scary. Don't even know names and we're already yeah.
First of all, I didn't know that was gonna happen at 9 o'clock in the morning. So
Yeah, I love that. I'm with it. Cool. Well, this feels great, y'all. Any other pieces connected to the retreat that we still need to flesh out, or do we feel good about what's on the table and what needs to be updated, edited? Which I think really are the 2 sessions that we've named: CCW, Freedom Dreaming, and Nuestro Poder. 3 sessions.
yeah,
Oh, and then
I think
adding,
what's coming up for me,
yeah.
I feel good about like kind of going from here now that all the ideas have been shared.
Mhm.
So I think curriculum can like take ownership of moving forward.
Mhm.
I am thinking about you, Tanya. I mean, this is everybody, but if you wanted to look through some of the lesson plans and kind of drop some of what maybe was coming up as you reflect on the sessions, right? And make those observations of where we could touch on certain systematic issues and naming them, particularly the ones like La Cultura Cura and the racial ethnic identity one. I think for the freedom dreaming, Lucia, like we'll feel really good about that. So maybe just those 2 lesson plans and kind of seeing like what are some of the observations, some of the offering suggestions you have. That would be neat.
Yeah, yeah. I definitely, yeah, in my own notes, I have like a draft of
Mm,
things for discussion, and I guess like would that be best in the lesson plans themselves to add comments?
yeah.
Okay. And yeah, then whenever Lucia gets back or we if we like regroup to go
Mm-hmm.
deeper into curriculum, then we can like obviously have that like back and forth. Oh, I think this, I think this. Yeah. I like that.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds good.
Yay. that'll be nice. But yeah, I'm feeling good.
Yay. All right. I'm jotting down some things. Let me put this to yeah. Do you feel good, Mireya, about updating Lucia on where we are with curriculum tomorrow?
Yeah.
Okay. And I'll likely share just some big picture pieces with Brian for tomorrow, so I can take the lead on those updates. But I want to make sure that we're creating some good communication flows. Is there anything that we need from him or that y'all need from him as you're mapping out curriculum pieces that we need to flag?
Mm, no.
Yeah, nothing is coming to mind for me.
Well, that feels great. All right, y'all.
Actually,
Yeah.
I don't think this is about him, but I want to name it. We will have someone in a wheelchair. So really
Mhm.
wanting to think about the
Mhm.
space and things like that. For sessions, but I think in general, like, if we do a data walk, like the identity labels, where are we placing them? Like how high are we placing them? Just thinking about how we organize the room. Last year we were a little tight, so do we need a bigger room? Do we need a different space? So that, ¿cómo se llama? I know he said he was my student too, but what's his name? Eric. But just want to make sure Eric can like move around easily.
Yeah. Thank you for naming that, Mita. Yeah, that I wonder if when we're on campus Saturday, we can take a look at the space we'll be in because we are moving into a different location. That way, as y'all are mapping out activities, you have a sense of what that space will look like to consider those accommodation pieces. But that's, yeah, something for us to keep in mind as we're even thinking about community building or other activities that we'll be doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you were named that. Okay, cool. All right.
I'm even thinking like, I don't know, like when we do the circle, like we say step, take a step forward. Do we say like move forward, move back? I don't know. I guess I don't know what that would look like, but
Yeah.
if y'all have any questions or experiences.
Yeah, this is definitely going to be a learning, I think, moment for all of us. But your gut is right, Mireya. I think trying to, even challenging ourselves with how we're communicating will be different. But yeah, I would imagine things like that, right? Moving forward, piping up, piping down.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Language can be so ableist, isn't it?
Yes.
Language. Okay. Cool. All right, y'all. Let me see. I'm back in our agenda. We have about 12 minutes left. Here's my proposal for game plan. For Q1 priorities, Mireya, I'm wondering if that's something you and I can move forward with. And I want to propose that for the next 11 minutes that we have left. Tanya, you had named something in one of your intentions like 2 weeks ago about just ideas that were coming up, and you might have already had this conversation with Mireya, but I'm curious if there's, as we get ready to map out what's coming down the pipeline for the rest of the quarter, I'm curious, yeah, what's kind of coming up for you as just opportunities or things that you're seeing that we could continue developing or incorporating in the rest of fellowship programming that you haven't seen yet, so that we can take some of those ideas into consideration as we map out for the rest of the quarter and ultimately for the long term. But just a little short brain dump as we map that out. Does
Yeah,
that feel?
it does, yeah.
Stop my music. All right. I'll do some, I think we could just capture some thoughts here at the bottom, but yeah, I'd love to hear what's been on your mind, Tanya. You've gotten a chance to see so much already, and a lot in a very quick time frame. So I'm just so curious as to what is kind of coming up for you as you think about opportunities with fellowship programming.
So I feel like what has come to mind for the most part is like long-term opportunities or resources that I can volunteer. Like I know I'm working on a curriculum feedback kind of report or project for the end of July, beginning of August, but like other pieces like these feel like so specific, but like for example with the terminology walk that we did at statewide, little pieces or things like, oh, how can I add to the knowledge being shared? How can I like add information that I know from my expertise, or put in the legwork to like do research and offer that up as like not necessarily something that's incorporated into the curriculum, but it can be like part of a toolkit for fellows to like reference, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
I don't know how useful it'll be. I also don't know, like, y'all share slides on Mighty Networks after, like, for example, after last night. Um, Pieces like that, I'm like, I don't know if those are even useful at all, but like, I would be happy to work on them even like past the time of like my time with Latinx Ed as an offering, just because it's like something I like, am interested in doing and love doing. Um, Sorry, let me go back to my notes.
While you're looking that up, Tanya, I'll just name it. The toolkit, I think, has been a dream. Like Mireya has talked about having even things like the community builders. Fellows have asked for those. Like, do you have the instructions for these? Because they want to incorporate a lot of the things that we do in retreats in their work. So that would be incredibly helpful. In the feedback survey for the retreat, for the workshop yesterday, one of the fellows did name, like, can I present this information to my class? So folks are wanting a way to like share this back out with the people that they work with or the people that they're supporting. So yeah, I think the toolkit would be incredible to think about.
Yeah. And yes, Mireya, you just put in the chat one pagers. That's like totally like literally exactly what I had in my notes. I'm like, would that be an option? Like for the terms one pagers, um, like if we want to give them more info on freedom dreaming, like I'm sure Lucia has a lot of research that she's done. Like, can I help in any way to compile that into like a one page or something? And like you're naming, if fellows are really wanting to like disseminate any of the info we're giving them to others, like how can we create a toolkit, or how can I help also like do research, or if it's like throwing stuff together on Canva to like create kind of a concise something that they're gonna want to reference, not just like a big like kind of encyclopedia of things, but something like simple, understandable, even something like, and I don't know, maybe y'all have already done this and I just haven't like come across it yet, but are they able to like explain the point of Latinx Ed and this fellowship or these retreats to like their family? Like, are there offerings in like Spanish, for example, for them to share with like, family, like, eso es lo que estoy haciendo, like, I don't know. It feels like a really lofty idea, and like you have mentioned, y'all have been dreaming about that. That's really like my unpolished like reflections that I've thinking about as offerings depending on needs of the org, immediate needs versus like long-term dreams. Yeah.
I'm like, are we like maybe changing the deliverable?
I know. I'm like, okay, here on a what is Sally expecting of you? Because I do think in the past we have had pivots depending on what the fellow is interested in doing. But what you are sharing, while a report would be helpful, this is also and if it's more aligned with your interest, right? I am wondering what pivots or changes might be most helpful for us as an organization. Because even I think a lot of the feedback that you've been giving us is what you would include in the report. Like we're not with lack of feedback from you already. We've already gotten a lot of that from your observation. So just putting this out there, I do think if this is something that you're interested in, there is a need, Tanya. Okay. So this would be incredible. And I think when I think about long-term impact, this would be like to be able to have resources already created and curated for fellows right after they participate in the fellowship would be a dream. So it sounds like there. Okay. Thanks for adding that. Yeah, that's something I'll put that out. I'll let y'all decide on what that might look like, but no, Tanya, that's yeah, there's some openness there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I'd be happy to. We can definitely continue to explore, but we just done a lot. Well, at least with fellowship, I think we've done a better job of reflecting as we go. So to what Kira's saying, like, I feel like we know what's on your mind. You have been vocalizing some really important, like, I know you don't name it as like changes you're asking. You've named like offerings or curiosities, but they really are like a call of action to us too, of how can we think more critically about what we do and why we do it and how we do it. And we're open to that. We want that and we need that. So just want to name that because we really do appreciate your observations. And you can name it differently, but I think ultimately it is it's a call to action of like that we think we take it as a way to think more critically, and we don't see it as you overstepping or anything like that. So if this is something that's coming up for you, and this is something we are naming we do need as well, then we could move in that direction. And I think it still connects to like an evaluation in some way. Like you're looking at the whole program and then putting like a toolkit with it, right?
Yeah. And like it's dependent on what y'all need or immediate needs, right? Because I'm with y'all through the end of the month. And I offered up these other things. I don't know if they would get done by the end of the month, but I'd be happy to work on them like past that because this is just what I'm interested in, what I studied, stuff like that. It depends on y'all. What do y'all need from me? Y'all have been
I can
naming, obviously, but
we can definitely confirm a couple things, and I reach out to Sally to at least get a gauge on is this something we can explore, right? So let's continue to have conversations and we'll go from there.
good.
Yay. Any other ideas, thoughts, Tanya, as you think about your time so far that are coming up for you in terms of opportunities?
Not really sure. That was really the big one that I've been like trying to parse out.
Kira and I were briefly chatting too. I think this is a good opportunity to ask you because she asked me like, oh, like, what kind of jobs, what are you looking for, right? Because we know the fellowship will end. And you've moved, right? And so we want to make sure that we can also be good at like connecting you to opportunities. And so maybe this is a chance to kind of share what are you interested in, and if we come across job opportunities, we can share it with you. We also we do get a lot of job opportunities, and we share them with the fellows, but you're not in that the Google group that we have. So we're like, we need to make sure we like start tagging Tanya so that she can kind of see some of these opportunities. But yeah, what are you interested in? And I know you shared one organization you were looking into, but tell us more.
Yeah, I mean, I swear I keep pitching myself to any like space I walk into. I'm like, by the way, guys, I'm looking for a job. Um, I like I went to Oscar, I think was leading or founding the civic engagement org called Votemos Durham, and I went to their meeting or a
Mm.
meeting this week, and I was like, hey guys, I need a job.
Mhm.
I've been saying to people, anything in education, I'm gonna keep it real. I looked at teacher salaries and it's not good, so I don't know if I'm open to teaching. Anything in the realm of education, um, advocacy and organizing, and that's like really broad just because I feel like I have organizing experience as a student, but like I know that there are job listings out there for people to do that work more in the community in terms of civic engagement, reproductive rights, just getting the Latino community engaged. Sorry, that feels like a lot of like rambling, but anything where I can leverage skills that I've done research, I've done writing long papers, long projects. Um, I've done community-based education, so like outside of traditional K-12 school systems, um, similar to like the work Latinx Ed is doing in terms of like lesson plans for like liberation schools, freedom schools. But I don't really know if there's a lot of job offerings for that. Even like museum like education, when they have like an arm that educates or does like work things with students,
Yeah.
anything like that. Yeah.
Do you have experience or interest in access, college access?
Yeah, I was actually, as Alice was like presenting last night, I was looking up different college access programs. I'm more familiar with like things in Florida and in Georgia, but I was like, I don't even know what is out there in North Carolina for me to get plugged into.
Mhm.
Yeah, but I would be interested in that too.
Tell me about to, yeah, there's a couple of orgs that I know are hiring currently. Um, Let me send you one right now that,
Are you thinking about student you?
yeah, I'm also thinking about Emily K. Do you have the student you want
Oh,
pulled up?
no, I was trying to pull up to see.
With the one that I just dropped, Tanya, the person who is the director of that program is one of my friends. So if you are interested and want to chat with anyone about it, that was my old job. So I'm happy to.
Be a reference.
Next, okay, yeah, definitely feel free to oh my, not me publicizing the Emily K Center right now.
Or even you bringing that up is also a good point in that I'm looking at all of these jobs and just like, going to a website, going to their careers, seeing what the job is and being like, oh, I'm interested in that. But I also don't know the culture of these orgs or what they're like. Like, you know what Jessica named last night where she like was transitioning out of the Hunt Institute to a new job. I don't know anything. I don't know her tea. But I was like, I saw the Hunt Institute and I bookmarked it. But if what she's saying, it wasn't a great environment, and I did more research and other people complained too, then I'm like, oh, I would love to hear off the record tea on these orgs, right? Because I also want a workplace that's not gonna kill me.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
this is, I think, como se dice, what a wild way the universe has worked, Tanya. But you have now a network of 176 people who, if you have questions about an organization, if we don't know them, somebody in the network knows them. So as you're doing that research, if there are any orgs that you're like, I am curious or want to get connected to someone there, I'm sure that there's someone in that network who either is connected to or can connect you. So yeah, definitely keep us in the loop. But yeah, Hunt Institute is a space that challenges folks, is all I will say. Yeah, and unfortunately they do really good work, like bipartisan work, and yeah, I think there's just been challenges with their leadership, so it's
Interesting.
a hard space to be in, but yeah. Medea just dropped another org that she was connected to.
Yeah, I worked there during the summers. Abby actually worked there. So you should probably talk to Abby because she has more recent experience. The leadership has changed since I was there. More than 10 years ago. So so definitely getting people who are more involved or have recent experiences would be good. But I do think that they're doing great work. A lot of the students they work with are Latinos. And that's definitely an area of growth for them. I think that they've been doing more efforts, um, but I think that like people like us need to be leading those efforts. And I don't know if they've always had Latina leaders kind of starting and really we understand what our families need the best, right? So I think it's a good place to explore for sure. They have quite a bit of jobs, like job postings on there. I don't know how many of those are like full-time. For that one, I don't know if it has to be, if they have to live in Charlotte.
No, is that what it was?
uh, I know she had shared one at the retreat, no sé si es el mismo, but she had mentioned like you need to be in Charlotte. I think Luisa was there in that convo and she said, well, I'm not graduated yet, but I am from Charlotte, so in the future maybe they could connect. So that's the only thing with Road to Hire. I think they're predominantly in Charlotte.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, thank you for sharing these.
yeah, we'll continue to share too, Tanya, as stuff comes up. But yeah, definitely keep us updated as you're out in the fields. And if you need us to connect you or put in a good word, no, we're happy to do that too.
Thank you.
Yay. All right. Well, this feels like a good stopping point then. Mireya, I'm wondering if we take a break too and reconnect maybe around what time are you thinking? Let's see if we're thinking the same time.
30?
Okay, perfect. Let's do that. And then we can map out Q1.
Yes.
All right. All right, y'all. Thanks so much for a great meeting. Cuídense. Nos vemos.
Thank you.